Okay, it is high time that I get rid of some books, so let's do an unhaul. So first up, I will be getting rid of the entirety of the Bridgerton series. I started reading The Duke and I a few months ago, and I just couldn't get into the story. I was a bit distracted by other books that I were enjoying a little bit more, and so I just kept putting it down, and I just had no desire to pick it back up. And then I also saw like a few lines from the, I guess, Colin and Penelope storyline in book three, three or four, one of the books. And yeah, it was a little bit too spicy for my taste. So I think I'm just going to retire these and drop them off at a little free library so someone else can enjoy them more. Okay, next was this My Hero Academia. I got this in a box with other books that I got from I think it's Better World Books or something like that. So this is like a random book that they threw in there that I didn't order. So I have no connection to it. So I'm fine with getting rid of it. Next is The East Indian by Brenda Chari. And I read this in my TBR jar picks my books for, I said a week at first, but it was really a month. Insider baseball. And yeah, I just was very meh about this book. I think I gave it a 3 star, and I don't see myself rereading it ever. So I'm happy to get rid of it. The next book that I read in that vlog as well was These Walls: The Battle for Rikers Island and the Future of America's Jails by Eva Federle. I got the ARC as well as the finished copy, and I don't need the ARC anymore because I have the finished copy, but I enjoyed the book. I just don't need 2 copies. Next is Her Good Side by Rebecca Witherspoon. I got this in a art giveaway and I started reading it. I thought I would be interested in it because it's like fake dating and there's basketball involved and I love watching basketball. But yeah, nothing was really gripping me in this story. I didn't really care for it. And so, again, with a lot of books like that where I got as like an art giveaway and I didn't necessarily pick the book myself, I have little to no connection with it, so I'm happy to kind of move it on to the next person. In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. I got this from Ollie's outlet like months ago. It has to be a full year by this point. And I was really excited because I've heard about this book. I heard it's really popular. I got it for like $3. And I started reading it recently because I was trying to get through a lot of these books that have just been sitting on my shelf forever. But man, this book, I just didn't like it. I couldn't get into it. Like, we essentially, the premise of the book is that she is, this high powered lawyer. She's had this longtime boyfriend. They're about to get engaged. They get engaged. And then they are, moving into this next stage of life. She goes to sleep, wakes up, and it's like this completely different guy she wakes up next to, and she's married to him, and they have a committed relationship. And this book really took a turn because literally in the first like 10, like maybe the second chapter or something like that, she ends up like sleeping with this guy, the guy that she like wakes up to and is married to, and she has no like connection with this guy. Obviously, she doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know who he is. And yeah, and it's like very like spicy, and I just was not expecting it to jump into that so quickly. So this is definitely not the book for me, but if you're interested in that, you know, all power to you. Did you hear about Kitty Karr by Crystal Smith Paul? I did read this book in its entirety, and I was a little disappointed in this one. I didn't really care for it. I thought that there are a lot of things I could say about this book. I feel like I should probably do a more in-depth review about it, but I'm not going to do it here. But I'll say that it's historical fiction, and we're following this young woman who is Kitty Karr, and this is like 2 different timelines. So there's like a past timeline, and then there's a present timeline. And in the present, Kitty Karr has passed away, and she's left her entire estate to this family. And Kitty Karr was white and this family was black. And so the big question was, what was their connection between these? What was the connection between these 2 people or these families? And why would Kitty Karr give all this money to this black family? And, you can only guess why the reason would be. But I was intrigued by that premise, but there was just a lot about this story that I did not care for. There's a lot of in this story that just kind of seemed too far-fetched, and obviously it's fiction, but like particularly, and this is a slight spoiler, so like I'll put the timestamp on when I start and stop these spoilers, but there's a particular part where like the mom is like Kitty Karr's mom essentially is encouraging her to like cross over and like be in the white world and no longer be black because Kitty Karr is like passing for white. And like her mom is the one who kind of tricks her into, crossing over and says like, don't talk to me, don't communicate with me because I want you to like live a better life, like use this gift that God's giving you of being like white presenting. And I just wasn't feeling that. I felt like that was really far-fetched. Like what mother would do that, like completely like push her away like that just so that she could be, in the white world. So it left a bad taste in my mouth. I wasn't the biggest fan of that. And there were plenty of other things I didn't really care for. So yeah, I did not care for this book and I was slightly disappointed because I really thought that I was going to love it. And I am ready to let this one go as well. Next was a book that I read and recently talked about in my wrap up, and that was One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this book 2.5 stars. And yeah, like I said in my wrap up, I liked it towards the end, but the first 2/3 of the book just didn't hit for me. So I think me and TJ are just not meant for each other. Next is Morrigan's Cross by Nora Roberts. I started reading this book and it just kind of took me into another direction like that I didn't know. I picked it up at a garage sale. I think it had something to do with like vampires popped up. Something weird happened. I don't really remember because I like read the first like couple chapters and I just was like, you know what? And I'm just gonna get rid of this book. So yeah, I don't know much about this book, and I just remember reading the first couple chapters and just not feeling it and just putting it in the unhaul pile. So I think I'm just gonna stick with my first mind and move this one along. Next is Quarter Fives by Kate Elliott. I read this book and I gave it 3 stars. It was good, but it wasn't good enough that like I wasn't invested enough to want to know what was going to happen with the rest of the series. So I got this book because I had purchased the second book, The Poison Blade, from Ollie's, and they didn't have the first one there, but they had the second one because it has a lot of like surplus books. So I decided to pick up this one so that I could read this one and then read the second book. But I read this one and, was just underwhelmed. So there's no need for me to keep both of these books. So I'm getting rid of both. Next up is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And this one was kind of disappointing because I know that a lot of people really love this story and I just wasn't enjoying it, wasn't feeling it. This particular female main character is very much so obsessed and attracted to the male main character who's a little bit older than her, but he just kind of doesn't care for her. I don't see any mutual like love there. It's definitely kind of unrequited, and he's kind of like, well, my wife passed away, and so sure, I need somebody to be my companion. So sure, come along on the ride with me. And yeah, throughout the story, I guess you're finding out more about Rebecca and who she was and the circumstances of her death. And it's supposed to be kind of alarming, but yeah, I just wasn't really vibing with it. So I DNF'd this book at like I want to say 20 pages or so. So yeah, this just wasn't for me. I thought I was gonna enjoy it because I did really enjoy Jane Eyre, but I felt like I was anticipating more of like a mutual attraction to each other and a mutual affection, but it was definitely her like being obsessed with him and him just being indifferent, and I just wasn't signing up for that. Next up is going to be a little bit of a surprise because it's Rootless by Crystal Zara Appiah. And I read this book for my vlog, TBR Jar Picks My Reads. And I did enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. But my hesitation with keeping this on my shelves is that the subject matter is very intense, and specifically like with when it comes to family and to have kids, to not have kids, all of that. And I personally didn't feel like I would keep it on my shelves and reread it. That's kind of the bar I set with books that I keep on my shelves, is that if I'm going to reread it, then I want to keep it. But if it's a book that like I read, I enjoyed, but I don't see myself rereading it, then I'd rather it go to someone who actually would, enjoy it a little bit more than I would. Next one is another book that is a fan favorite with the book community, and that is River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. And Man, this book disappointed me as well. It is a historical fiction novel that is following a young woman who was recently emancipated from slavery. It's set in Barbados, and after the enslaved are emancipated in Barbados, this woman goes on a mission to find her 5 children that were taken away from her during her enslavement. And overall, the premise obviously sounds really great. I really enjoyed the premise. I enjoyed following her for the most part throughout these different places, but there was just a lot in this story that just didn't feel historically accurate. Like this, it didn't seem like it's possible the way that she was kind of moving about in certain towns. And I didn't like that we were so much in the mystical part of it. There was a lot of magical realism and we were in her dreams a lot. I wanted it to be like a little bit more concrete, and we just were following her in her journey throughout the different Caribbean countries. So that was a little disappointing. And especially, yeah, I don't want to be too critical of the book, but overall, like for me, I personally just didn't really enjoy it that much. It was okay, but I just don't see myself rereading it ever. I thought I would reread it, but I just don't see it happening. It's been almost a year and I have no desire to pick it back up. So there's that. And then I would say though, if you never read historical fiction before and you just want kind of a little taste of it, very light on your historical fiction and leaning more into, magical realism and other things, and you don't really need a lot of concrete historical facts to be in your historical fiction novels, then I say pick this book up and you probably will enjoy it. But for me and my taste, it didn't work out. And lastly, another favorite, I feel like I'm just coming after people's favorites with this video, but you know, it is what it is Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is actually my first R.F. Kuang book that I read. And I really thought that I was going to love this book. I think I ended up giving this I think I ended up giving it a 3. I think I wanted to give it a 2 or 2.5, but I ended up giving it a 3. Yeah, this book just wasn't it for me. It's historical fantasy, but it's definitely low on the fantasy, which again, I thought that would work for me because I love historical fiction. And I don't mind having little to no, I guess, fantasy in my historical fantasy. I like that it's as close to real life parameters and real life conditions as possible. I think I'm going to try to give The Poppy War a try by R. Kwong and see if I, like that book at all. But yeah, this just wasn't it for me. I know that a lot of people love this is a favorite book of a lot of people, but for me, it just was okay. And I don't want to keep just okay books on my shelf. All right, so those are all hold on, let me count. So those are all the 21 books that I am getting rid of. Let me know in the comments below which one of these books or a few of the books that you are most surprised that I am unhauling. And thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.